Hi everyone. I hope everyone is good. It's we in the middle of the year, and for me, I feel quite exhausted. I don't know about you, but it's been good. Just busy. I know I haven't been creating any videos for a while. Yeah, it's been hectic on my side. But I missed this. I missed. I missed doing this, and I am rusty. Like I just sitting up. It took longer than it normally does. So it means I haven't been doing it for a while. But other than that, I have something to share. It's something that I think throughout the month of July, the Lord has been really speaking to me on this, and even just last night when I was just having my own moment with Him. I was just going through this, and So we'll just look at these verses, like this story. Growing up, I would have the desire to read the Bible, but I wouldn't know where to begin, right? Other than the fact that at Sunday school we would be taught certain verses to recite, but then where would you go? If maybe let's say I want to read Psalms 23, I'd go to my mom and be like, okay, can you please get for me this chapter, and I would recite it, and then she'd go. But one of my favorite stories to read in the Bible was the story of Esau and Jacob. And just like any other firstborn, I didn't like Jacob. I didn't like Jacob and his mom. And for those who don't know the story, you can start reading Genesis 25, and their story starts in verses 19. Okay, so the story is their dad is Isaac. Isaac is Abraham's son, the son that Abraham he was born when I think he was 100 years old. He was really old. He and Sarah were very old when Isaac was born. So he was the promised son. He was the promised son. Abraham had moments of just questioning God, that you've promised me this, and there's a point where God says, get out of the tent and look up the stars, look up the sky, and if you can count any of those stars, the amount of stars that you see, that's your descendants. So you are going to multiply to that magnitude. So you're going to have that many sons and daughters. And he was just praying for an heir, for a son. And then God says, well, I'm going to exceed your expectation. You're going to have descendants, a multitude of descendants. And Isaac was born through that promise. So Isaac now marries a woman called Rebecca. Rebecca struggles with fertility, but then, Isaac prayed. Isaac prayed for his wife to conceive, and she conceived, and there was a prophecy. The prophecy was she was going to have twins. And the prophecy goes as far as saying there are two nations within her, and there's a struggle. And at some point it says the older will serve the young. Okay. So these twins are born, and those twins are Esau and Jacob. Esau is the first one who comes out. But even then, when he comes out, the second, who is Jacob, holds at the heel of Esau. So already there's a sort of a competition for the first one position. So I would read the story, and I would get really frustrated with Jacob and his mom. So before I go to Jacob and his mom, I'll just read. So anyway, when they describe the two sons, they're very different. Esau is sort of like the outdoor type of guy who is a hunter, and then Jacob is more the softer one who is always close to his mom, always within the homestead. But Isaac gravitated more towards Esau than he did Jacob, and Jacob and his mom had a close relationship. But I'll just read from 29. I'll read 25, 29 to 34, so that we don't waste a lot of time. So once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." And Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. I love the Message version. It says, Jacob said first, "Swear to me," and he did. On oath, Esau traded away his rights as the firstborn. Jacob gave him bread and stew of lentils. He ate and he drank, got up and left. That's how Esau shrugged off his rights as the firstborn. Okay, so obviously I didn't, okay, let me just try and fast track. So what ends up happening? Okay, there's this agreement that takes place. But later on, when you read 27, from Genesis 27, Jacob and his mom end up tricking their dad Isaac. Isaac is now old, can't even see. So they deceive him in thinking Jacob was Esau. Because Esau was hairy, they put some sort of goat hair to make it seem like he's hairy. He put on Esau's clothes so that he could smell like him. So Isaac initially was sort of hesitant. He kept questioning, "Are you sure?" Trying to really make sure that it's Esau he's communicating to. So they prepare this meal for Isaac, and Isaac eats and then blesses Jacob. So what he was actually doing, he was passing down the generational blessing that he received from his dad. So now he's passing it on to his firstborn son, and he thought it was Esau, and yet it was Jacob. So reading that, I always would ask my mom, "Can you please open this the story of the two brothers?" And I would read it, and every time I would just, the takeaway would be, this Jacob guy, I just couldn't stand him for a very long time. And I didn't like when they would speak of him as how him being a trickster ended up working in his favor or something like that. I just saw it as an injustice. But the Lord has sort of opened my eyes to what I think a lot of us are missing with the whole story of these two brothers. So what ends up happening, Esau eventually finds out what his mom and his brother did, and he now wants to kill Jacob. And then Jacob flees from his father's home to his uncle. His name is Laban. So he flees from his home and he moves to his uncle Laban. When he arrives there, so prior to arriving at Laban's home, he has an encounter with the Lord where he sees a stairway of angels coming up and down, and then he has this experience, and he makes a covenant with the Lord and asks that should the Lord be with him and bless him, he will honor the Lord. And so he enters Laban's home with nothing, right? So what ends up happening over the years, he works for his father-in-law, who is a trickster himself. and he tricks him, he deceives him. He took 2 of his daughters, and even then there was deception involved. And even, so they reach an agreement of him. So, sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. Laban got richer because of Jacob's labor. So Jacob was carrying this blessing from the Lord, and Laban's livestock and wealth multiplied. And so when Jacob threatened to leave, Laban creates a sort of an agreement with him that, okay, if you can get these type of animals. If they're strict, if they're spotted, they're yours. And that's what happened. I think I taught on this in my last video. So anyway, he's tricked. Laban tricks Jacob, but even then, with that deception being involved, he still becomes wealthier than Laban, and then he eventually leaves. So now the where I want us to focus on is when Jacob, who hasn't been seeing his brother for years, now is about to meet his brother, and that's in Genesis 33. So this part, for me, this part is what has been, I can say, just opening my eyes to, I think, something that maybe we miss and we don't think about. So as expected, Jacob is scared to meet up with his brother because of what he did. So what he does is he has this moment of spending time with the Lord. He's fearful. He comes up with a plan. He sends a gift ahead of stock, like of livestock. Certain number of cattle, certain number of sheep, certain number of, so it's a gift that he wants to appease his brother with. So he sends this gift ahead with his servants, and then he also comes up with a plan. Should his brother attack, how is he gonna try and survive the attack? But where I want us to get is when he eventually meets his brother. Obviously, his brother has received the gift ahead of prior to meeting him. So when they meet, his brother responds differently than what he was expecting. His brother is happy to see him. He hugs him, kisses him, cries, happy to see him, and then he asks him about this gift, like, what is this about? And then he says, no, it's a gift, please receive it, it's from your servant. Like, so he takes a posture of humility when approaching his brother, and his brother is like, no, keep it, I have my own, I'm wealthy, like, I have enough. And he says, no, please, it's a gift. But what I like from that is, I think when we taught about Jacob's wealth, or Jacob's, how can I put this? What makes Jacob stand out? We always taught of the wealth he comes out with from Laban's home, and that's proof, and that's what we have made. That's what we recognize as the proof that God was with Jacob, and that Jacob is God's chosen one, right? But when they meet, and then both sons are wealthy in terms of physical, in terms of the physical wealth, like you can see, they both are wealthy in terms of cattle, in terms of number of children, like, and all of that. So on the when we look at from the eyes of the physical, they are both wealthy as Isaac's children. So that brings us to question, then what was this blessing, that the trade-off between the two twins? What's that blessing? What is it that makes the difference between the two brothers? And what stands out is that when Isaac blessed Jacob, right? The material achievement, the material wealth, I believe, is an addition of the main blessing, which was when God blessed Abraham, he said, nations will be blessed through you. So God has this plan for humanity. Men fell in the Garden of Eden, but God has a redemption plan as promised. He says there's a promise when there was a curse on the serpent that you will bruise. He will strike your head and you will bruise his heel, and that is redemption. That's him introducing the story of redemption, of how he's going to redeem humanity back to himself. And he will is Jesus, is referring to Jesus, her offspring, Eve's offspring. So now I'm going to try and come and connect everything. Abraham becomes that person that's chosen, that through his lineage, God's son, the Son of God, will come through him, right? So it says nations will be blessed through you, right? So that's the nation. So when we look at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jacob eventually God changes his name to Isaac. I hope I'm making sense. So yeah, Jacob's name eventually becomes Israel. So that's the nation. That's where the nation of Israel comes from. Jacob eventually has 12 sons. And of the 12 sons, one of his sons, whose name is Judah, his lineage leads up to the birth of Jesus. Okay, so the blessing that Jacob was able to recognize, even though he could not say, I don't think his mind, his imagination could go as far as saying, this is connected to God's plan to redeem the world back to him. That God himself will come through the world through my descendants, right? I don't think his brain could go there, but he knew there was something big and special that Esau was missing, right? So what I like is when he enters Laban's home, he comes in empty-handed, like he has nothing. It doesn't say he comes in with wealth or anything. No. Hence his sons were just complaining amongst themselves that Jacob is taking their dad's wealth, because Jacob came with nothing. On the physical, Jacob came with nothing, right? But if we had a way of having a pair of glasses that helps us see the spiritual, I think we would see this blessing that he was entering Laban's home with. And the blessing was he is chosen, that his seed, right? That his seed, the Son of God, would be birthed through his seed. So that's the blessing. And then everything else, the cattle, the wives, and all of that, that's an addition to this blessing that he has. Okay, so now I'm bringing it to us. I'm bringing it to us. I can say that we find ourselves in this sort of a battle of wanting to be like everyone else, of wanting to have a life that goes the same pace with everyone, as expected. At 18, you complete your schooling, your high school, and then you go off to university, you go to college, search some tertiary institution of some sort to start out your career. There's a certain age in that, maybe in your 20s, or you're getting married, you're starting to have children, all of those things. So we all have this a trail mapped out, that this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what's supposed to happen. But what do we say in a case where God is involved in your story? God is involved in everyone's story who allows him to. I'm not saying you're special than everyone else. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, okay, hear me. What I'm saying is, it's easy for us to say there's something wrong when our life don't follow the pattern that's expected, right? But who's to say that we need to stop looking at the world and life with the same vision and mindset Esau did. Because for him to say, what good is this for me if I'm just going to die? Obviously, he was not going to die. He was being dramatic, but he didn't see the value of what he and Jacob did, because I think even though he did not have a clear understanding of what it meant, but he knew it's bigger than we think, right? So now I'm bringing it to me, and I'm thinking about me, right? It's easy, right? It's normal. Rather, it's normal for me to say, okay, there's something wrong with the fact that life is supposed to look like this and it's supposed to take this path, right? But if I'm a person who has surrendered their life to God, and I'm saying whatever it is that comes into my life, I want it to be something that comes from you. Okay. And then because I am in the world, obviously, I do have days when I think as a natural person, and I see the situation as I see it with my physical eye, and I forget, right, that there's a spiritual aspect to everything. Since I do believe, as a believer, as a Christian, that there is a spiritual realm, right, and that I'm more than this physical being. I believe that when I pass on, my spirit still lives on. That's what I believe. So I also believe that in as much as the physical is real, the spiritual is real too. I know I feel like it feels like I'm just going around in circles, but I hope you're getting what I'm saying. What I now comparing the two brothers, what I'm picking up from the two is that one had a limitation of just viewing things from the physical, and the other had a different perspective of seeing life from a spiritual standpoint. Hear me, I'm not saying that my path is leading to a birth of a savior. I don't it doesn't say that anywhere in scripture. It doesn't say that. But he knew, he got the fact that there's something more at play here. As I was praying yesterday, and I was just thinking on this, the Lord brought when Abraham was with his nephew Lot. You can find this. It's in 13. Genesis 13. Okay, so they left together they left Abraham's land together when the Lord told Abraham, go from your people and I will show you where to go. And so Lot tags along. So they live together, but at some point the cattle they have and the servants becomes too much for both families, and so they had to now separate. So when it came to choosing the land, right, Abraham gave Lot the first choice. Like, okay, choose, where do you want to what land are you choosing for you and your family? And he looked, the Bible says he looked and he saw greenery. He saw what looked beautiful, and he chose that land. And in Lot choosing that land, Abraham chose Canaan, and that's where the Lord was sending Abraham. So he chose the land, and it says it's on the valley. It's very near to Sodom. And what ends up happening is that he actually ends up settling in Sodom. That's Lot. So Lot made a decision from a physical standpoint, not lacking the insight that this is a land that has that where it's so evil that his family ends up destroyed. Like he loses his wife. His wife turns into a pillar of salt. He has to be rescued out from that place. His children growing up in that awful, sinful land have a terrible viewpoint of life. And what they end up doing is they get their own dad drunk and they rape their dad because he's drunk, he doesn't know what's happening, so that they can have children, so that the name does not die or something like that. But just see the level of reasoning. It's what we would just call an embarrassment. it's an abomination, who thinks of something like that? But they did, because of the environment they were in. And Lot chose to settle his family in that environment because he lacked spiritual insight, and he just looked at the land with the physical eye, just that, and lacked the wisdom of inquiring of the Lord. Where is it, do you think it would be best for me to settle with my family? But he just made a decision based on what he sees, and that was more attractive, and that lured him, and he settled his family there. And so the generation of lineage became cursed because his children gave birth to the Moabites. The Moabites end up being sort of an enemy of the Israelites. So nothing good comes out from his descendants, right? But other than the fact that Ruth comes from that. But destruction just followed that decision. So with having that insight, that sort of revelation, now I'm bringing it to myself, right? I have bad days where I just look at the physical, and all I'm seeing is it doesn't make me happy, and I just feel, and that's where I end up finding myself in a place of feeling sort of frustrated and hopeless. But if I put on now lens, if I add a lens of a spiritual perspective, then I'm able to see that things aren't simply as they seem. All right, because even when it seemed like Jesus was dying on the cross, and the disciples were just devastated, and everyone was crying, and it seemed like hell won, it was actually God's plan. It was actually heaven executing its plan, and it was heaven having victory. It didn't seem that way, but that's what it was. On the physical, they saw Jesus dying, pleading in agony. But from a spiritual standpoint, it was Jesus taking back humanity, taking back authority from the devil, setting humanity free from the bondage of sin. The plan that is mentioned in Genesis at the 4, when it says, her son will strike your head, you will bruise his heel. That's what was happening in the cross. But from a physical standpoint, you could only see that Jesus, it was over with him. It was over this poor prophet who was raising people, who was raising the dead, who was healing the sick, who was opening their eyes, who was teaching people, was doing wonderful things. Is overcome by the cross, and it's over with him. But it was the beginning of God redeeming humanity to himself. So again, I hope I'm making sense, because to me it's making sense. So I hope I'm explaining it well. When we look at everyday life, right, and we see it as people are just mean, people are choosing to treat you terribly, or things financially are just not coming together, like nothing, like there's no clear direction, or it's like you feel maybe stuck and hopeless in what you're seeing. A lot is happening also in our country, a lot is happening in the world with all of that, and we can get lost with all of that. Get lost in someone saying, Lerato, you should be concerned, you're getting this older and you're still not married and you still have no children. I'm hearing a lot of people younger than me struggling with, like sort of finding certain things out, having things like fibroids, those sort of things, and it plays with my head, and I end up thinking, maybe I'm not going to have my own child, right? And I forget all the promises that God has spoken to me, which that if I put on a spiritual lens, I'm able to remind myself of that. But if I get stuck on another birthday is coming. Oh, I heard so and so struggled with this. Oh, I hear it's not good to have a child at this age. What if I might not meet the person I pray for? All of those things, right? If I'm sitting from a place of Esau's perspective, then I become hopeless, and I'm frustrated. I'm like, what's the point of all of this? And that's when I'm gonna say something like, what's the point to all of this? I'm dying anyway. I'm getting old anyway. Like, I'm not meeting the right person, or I might not have kids, as opposed to wearing those lenses and then reminding myself that God had spoken to me. God said I'm going to have a son. Just remind myself of all of that. And that despite how many birthdays pass, if I have that spiritual lens, right, then I look at the situation much differently. And I respond to life way differently than I would if I did not have that sort of perspective. That, Abraham chose Canaan when they were choosing land because he believed the Lord. He believed the Lord. And the Lord said, I will make you great. I will give you descendants. As much as the sand, like, can you count each grain? And honestly, like a grain of sand, you can't. It's vast. Can you count the stars? Like, I'm imagining the stars he was seeing was a whole lot more than we do because we have pollution living in the city. But I'm thinking somewhere out in the wild, you see a vast, like, you see them quite clearly, and there's a lot of them. I don't think it's possible to even count them. So that's from a spiritual vantage point. That's viewing things from that place as opposed to viewing things from this place, which is just man. And there's a verse that I used to struggle with, and that says, God says, I've loved Jacob and I've hated Esau. So I've struggled with that, like, God hates but I understand now what that meant. It was not referring to the twins per se, but it's referring to a person who thinks from a place of who limits things from just us as human beings. We do this ourselves. If you're unable to do things for yourself, then you're doomed. That's how some people think, right? I managed to get this degree. I'm a self-made woman, which actually it's not true. God says everything is His. So He allowed you to attain all those things. But to just have that carnal mindset, that's what God doesn't want. He wants a Jacob kind of mindset where you recognize the things of God, and you recognize that actually life is bigger than all of this, right? So I said a lot of things, and I hope I'm making sense, because to me, I am able to put it all together. So trying to wrap it up is, you can choose, right? We can choose to wake up tomorrow and look at all that's happening. You're frustrated with certain goals you've set for yourself, and you're unable to achieve them, and you don't know where to begin. You work hard and you don't see the results of your investment, or you can put on a different lens, and that lens is that I can do up to this point, but I have to put my trust in God to take me to the next level, which on my physical mindset and insight is limited, but trusting Him to take me to where it seems impossible. So yeah, I hope it makes sense, and I hope it blesses you. Please just go and just read for yourself. Read from Genesis. Read on Jacob and Isaac and their story, and Esau and their story, and how they end up. Like there's a sort of a portion where it just speaks of their descendants. Just go on and continue to also do your research. Israel ends up being like a big nation, something that is very influential, right, as opposed to Esau's descendants. But the big thing I think that we shouldn't miss here is having a different insight, a different perspective. Now I'm just reminded of when Elijah, was it Elijah or Elijah? Okay, one of the prophets. So the king sent men to attack them, and he was with his servant, and there was just a number of soldiers there to attack them. And so the servant is just trembling and he's scared. It's like, it's over with us, we're dead. And then Elijah says, Lord, open his eyes. Because he said, those who are on our side are way more than them and stronger. Then he says, Lord, open his eyes. And the Lord opens his eyes and he sees army. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's what we should be praying for and focusing on. That yes, today this is how my situation looks like. And every day the devil's going to send people, is going to create situations that remind me of my situation. And I choose. It's how I respond. Do I respond by agreeing with what I'm seeing and just being hopeless and just sad and frustrated and just want Jesus to come back, because then what's the point of living? Or do I respond in saying, sure, this is how it looks, but what I know is that the Lord has promised me that I'm going to have a son, that I'm going to have a family, all of those things, and put on that spiritual lens. Yeah, I hope I made sense. So I went longer than I normally do. But yeah, I hope this is a blessing to all of us, and may we all have a lovely week ahead, and trusting the Lord to be with us and to bless us. So yeah, thank you.